30 seconds. All right. All right, 15. All right, 17 and 5.
Honored to moderate this final debate between Republican Sheriff's candidate Dale Fowler and Justin Marr. I'll go over the ground rules a little bit for our viewers and refresher for the candidates. You'll each have opening remarks for 2 minutes, and then I've got a series of questions that I'm thankful for viewers of the Wade and Carter Show and Meet Victoria for submitting questions. So most of these have come from the community members themselves that are interested in who our next sheriff will be. So keep that in mind. And I will give each of you 90 seconds to answer the questions, and you'll each be asked the same question. Except when we get towards the end, as I explained to you, I will have some questions directed towards each of you. One question based on information from your own candidate's website. So that will be the only difference as far as the questions. My timer here will let you know when there's 30 seconds and 15 seconds, and then time stops. And then when the questions are through, we will have 1 minute for closing remarks. And via coin flip, it's been determined that Dale Fowler, you will start first. So if you would like to begin with your opening remarks, Dale, go right ahead. Welcome to the debate, and good luck.
All right, thank you, Ash. I want to say thank you to all of the viewers that are watching this live tonight. Thanks to the Wade and Carter Show, as well as Shaw Realty for sponsoring this event. I am Dale Fowler. I'm a Republican candidate for Sheriff of Victoria County, and I'm excited about the opportunity to be your next sheriff. A little bit of background about me. I began as my law enforcement career as a reserve sheriff's deputy with Dutch Meyer in 1986. Went through the Victoria College Police Academy and obtained a basic peace officer's certification, and for about the first 20 years participated in patrol activities. Now, when Sheriff O'Connor came into office, he asked me to serve as a special assistant to the sheriff, and also asked me to serve on his advisory board, which I did for his entire reign in office. So in those capacities, I was able to participate in budgeting and reviewing contracts. I participated in some of the hiring boards, ranging from clerical all the way to the chief deputy's position. We also reviewed contracts and those types of things in those capacities. About 13 years ago, I tried out for the Sheriff's Office SWAT team and won a spot on that team, and a lot of my time has been very active with the Sheriff's SWAT team for that entire time. So I'm a Master Peace Officer for the past almost 20 years, and I'm a Master SWAT Operator. Almost as significant is my business experience. Business experience in the electric industry with American Electric Power, Central Power and Light, president of the Victoria Economic Development Corporation the past 20 years. I have a bachelor's degree with a concentration in management, and I believe it's those experiences that allow me to provide the most value to the taxpayer, combined with the law enforcement experience. So thank you. Thanks for this. I'm looking forward to the next questions.
Justin, welcome to the debate. Your turn for opening remarks. Good luck.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Justin Marr. For over 2 decades, I've served full-time with the Victoria County Sheriff's Office. In those 2 decades, I've gained real-world law enforcement experience by working both in detention and the enforcement unit. I've been in a leadership position the majority of that time. With that said, my entire professional career, I've been a man of the people, for the people. This is demonstrated by the large and diverse amount of support I have received. It also shows by the overwhelming support I've received from the local law enforcement community. My career path and boots on the ground experience are what uniquely qualify me to be your next sheriff. You cannot effectively lead the women and men of the sheriff's office if you have not walked in their path. You cannot successfully serve the citizens of Victoria County unless you have been out in the communities with them to share in their triumphs and tragedies. In the world we're living in, we must have a sheriff that is connected not only to the community, but to the employees of the sheriff's office. Many of the problems we face nationally and locally have been due to an obvious disconnect between our law enforcement leaders and the public we serve. Victoria needs and deserves better. With the lawlessness and chaos we see happening in the country, we cannot afford a disconnected part-time law enforcement leader. I believe Victoria County needs a proven professional lawman that is connected to the men and women serving the Victoria County Sheriff's Office, as well as someone who is connected to the community he serves. Your safety and security is the cornerstone of the Sheriff's Office should be built on. I will be a sheriff of the people and for the people. Thank you.
Now, the questions will begin. You'll have 90 seconds to answer the questions, and if necessary, there will be rebuttal opportunities allowed. And again, thank you to the people of Victoria County who submitted most of these questions. I really appreciate it. My job as a moderator and a little bit easier as far as trying to come up with questions. So the first one is from a member of the community, and Dale, you'll have the opportunity to answer this one first. How should the public weigh your career experiences when considering voting for you for sheriff?
Well, I think the public should weigh both my law enforcement and my business experience in tandem. Obviously, at the sheriff's position, the sheriff's not going to be out working patrol necessarily or doing interdiction or courthouse security. The sheriff has to be able to set the vision and the mission of the agency and manage a $16.4 million budget and lead over 200 people. I think that's very important. A combination of my training, my education, and my business experience uniquely qualify me in that realm. Now, that being said, for over 33 years, I've been working with the men and women of the Sheriff's Office. Obviously, as I mentioned, the past 12 years, more focused on the SWAT team when it comes to those areas. Early years, it was in the patrol division mostly. So I think the combination is what's going to make the difference for me. I have an opportunity to use my skills, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, in Austin and Washington, because the ability to continue to bring funds into the community from outside is going to be critical, and it's a critical way that we can add value for the taxpayers, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about that more. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, again, and I'll repeat the question so it's clear. How should the public weigh your career experiences when considering you to vote for you for sheriff?
Well, I can't think of any better way than my career, my full-time career. I've got time in both divisions of the sheriff's office. Our detention unit alone is half of our budget. The rest of my time, and majority of my time, has been in the enforcement unit. Having that boots on the ground, ear to the ground type experience, there's no better way to lead the men and women of this office. I'm fully aware of the issues we have, not only within the office, but out in the community. I hear those complaints and those concerns on a daily basis, and I think that gives me the advantage.
Thank you. Dale, a big buzz phrase among new CEOs and leaders in all fields these days is the first 100 days on a job. If elected, what are your plans for your first 100 days on the job?
Well, thanks for that question, Ash. I've used this term a few times during the campaign, the 3 C's: connect, communicate, and collaborate. The first thing I have to do is make connection, and I'll explain that. And we're talking about probably the first ones are with the staff and the employees to better secure that connection and spend some time communicating. And actually, in that first 100 days, it's going to be more them speaking to me and me listening to them. I have to get a greater understanding of how they view their current circumstance and current situation. Justin's alluded to some concerns in that area. And then it's a collaboration to sit down at the table together and figure out how do we make the Victoria County Sheriff's Office to be the employer of choice in law enforcement in this whole South Texas region. And I think we can do that. So it's those 3 C's in the first 100 days with the employees, with Commissioner's Court, with the community, and also, very importantly, with the other agencies in the region. I'm very proud of the Sheriff's Alliance that has been formed largely with Sheriff O'Connor's leadership, and that Sheriff's Alliance is becoming a force multiplier for this region And so that's another group that we have to connect with even more. I've had the opportunity to visit with many of those gentlemen already, and I can tell you there's some good times in terms of proactive law enforcement because of that alliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, I'll repeat the question again. The big buzz phrase among new CEOs and leaders in all fields these days is, quote, first 100 days on the job. So if elected, what are your plans for your first 100 days on the job?
Well, basically, it's just the few items that I've been campaigning on this whole time. First, within the first 100 days, we're going to prepare and finalize the budget and get that over to the Commissioner's Court. With that said, then we're going to start looking at some of the manpower issues that have long plagued the Sheriff's Office. We're going to develop a career progression plan that has never been in place for the higher level positions at the Sheriff's Office. And we're going to continue and build on the regional coalitions that we're involved in. I have spoken to a few of those myself, and I look forward to working with them, and we're going to continue on.
Dale, law enforcement has been under a negative spotlight in recent weeks. A lot of calls to defund police departments around the country. If you're elected sheriff, how would you respond to a call to defund the Victoria County Sheriff's Office?
Well, the first and simple answer is defunding is really not an option, and looking for ways to increase funding. Now, that may not necessarily come directly from Commissioner's Court. It could. I do believe that we've got to analyze the entire operation. It's a large operation, and there are probably some efficiencies that we can find to make sure that we maintain an adequate level of funding and continue to put the boots on the ground that we're talking about. It's about safety and security for the citizens of Victoria. I'm very much a law and order kind of individual. I believe in the rule of law and the Constitution, both the United States and the state of Texas. I'm very happy to protect people's rights to peacefully demonstrate for their causes, but not lawlessness. And I don't believe the citizens of Victoria County will stand for that either. We're blessed, quite frankly, to be in Texas and to be in this part of Texas because the citizens of this area very much appreciate law enforcement. I was president for 2 years consecutively of the Victoria 100 Club, and that's a group that is very vocal in their support for local law enforcement, and it's an example of how citizens feel about law enforcement in Victoria. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin, law enforcement has been under a negative spotlight in recent weeks around the country. A lot of calls to defund police departments around the country. If you're elected sheriff, how would you respond to a call to defund the Victoria County Sheriff's Office?
Well, first of all, we can't defund the Sheriff's Office. I think what a lot of that hype is nationwide with the media is just the fact that some of your citizens are angry and upset. There's a large disconnect between law enforcement and the citizens we serve. And I think some of the first steps you can take to ease some of those issues is connect with your community. We need to reach out to these people and actually listen to them and come to some common ground. I think just the media has turned it into the actual defunding. Obviously, we don't want that to happen. There's lots of good citizens around here that need our service. We are fortunate the area we live in. We seem to be very respected, and we're not taking on some of the heat that you see up north and other areas of the country.
This next question is related. It was submitted from a community member. In light of the scrutiny on law enforcement around the country and the perception of use of excessive force, police brutality, or inability to restrain a suspect, what current standards or practices would need to be evaluated and possibly changed at the Sheriff's Office?
Well, I'd say first off, our use of force guidelines are in place and have really served us very well for many years. You don't see the types of complaints in Victoria County very rarely as what we're seeing on a national scale. Now, obviously, no one likes what we saw happen to Mr. Floyd, and those kinds of incidences are very rare and should never happen if at all possible. And that comes to more of training the officers of the policies you currently have, make sure they understand them and are willing to abide by those. One of my greater concerns is how do we as law enforcement professionals and law enforcement administrators identify officers when they maybe have been in a given area too long? What would cause an officer to act those ways, to use excessive force? Again, our use of force policies are good if they're followed. And so I'm more concerned about the individuals. Did we hire someone who we should have never hired, or did we let someone stay in a position too long and it impacted their judgment?
Justin, in light of the recent scrutiny on law enforcement agencies around the country and the perception of excessive force, police brutality, or the inability to restrain a suspect, what current standards or practices possibly need to be changed at the Victoria County Sheriff's Office, if any?
We need to, obviously, I think at least annually, need to reevaluate all of our policies, the use of force policy specifically for this question. A lot of our officers, what I've seen firsthand is they're trained in defensive tactics through the basic academy. They enter the career path, whether it's the jail or enforcement, and a lot of them don't receive, they receive very little training in that area after that. And that's something that we can do in-house. We have instructors, we just need to facilitate it and put that in place. I think we need to ramp up on our training there, as well as reevaluate the use of force policy.
The Sheriff's Office budget is over $16 million. Can you please explain to the voters your experiences and your positions that would prepare you to manage that budget?
Sure. Well, I had opportunity from the power company to review small department budgets. Obviously, at the VEDC, we have opportunities to work on our own budgeting, which has multiple sources of funding and, of course, a lot of expenditures. My bigger experience from the Sheriff's Office specifically is that time on the Sheriff's Advisory Board and Special Assistant to Sheriff O'Connor. Just about every year I had opportunity to review the proposed budget, make some recommendations, or at least listen to how we're going to present that budget. I was in the budget presentations this past year when Chief Boyd and Sheriff O'Connor presented those to Commissioner's Court. And so I think it's the experience with the existing Sheriff's Office budget that probably gives me a little bit more insight into how that's gone on. Granted, when we started 16 years ago with Sheriff O'Connor, the budget process was much more chaotic, if you will, and I watched the agency. Over time, we were able to get that budget proposal down to very small, very specific budgeting for the things we needed, not just the things we wanted, and then be able to, from year to year, show that to Commissioner's Court and give them comparisons on here's what you funded, here's what we did, here's what we really need. And so it's that kind of experience that I think is going to help me as I move forward into the Office of Sheriff.
Justin, Sheriff's Office budget is over $16 million. Can you explain to the voters your experiences and your positions that would help you prepare and manage that budget?
Well, first of all, I will take the budget on with conservative principles and values. I will rely on my commanders that are in place. They will present a budget for their department. I'm to oversee the budget. Basically, when the budget is finalized, it goes to the Commissioner's Court. Our budget will reflect the value of what we need to provide public safety to the community. Ultimately, it's up to the Commissioner's Court to put the price tag on public safety. With that said, there's some things I want to look at within the budget. Just from looking at it recently, I've noticed that since Sheriff O'Connor came into office, just the administration portion of the budget has increased 250%, while the other units, enforcement and detention and other areas, have basically stayed just a little above the rate of inflation. And I need to delve into that and look into that a little more.
We're going to turn direction and focus to the county jail on this next question. So one of the main responsibilities of the sheriff is the operation of the county jail. what do you see, Dale, as a major issue or major issues facing the jail, and how do you improve on those?
Well, there's a couple of issues. I'll start with the facility itself. Most of us in Victoria consider this the new jail. Well, that new jail is almost 40 years old. I had the opportunity when I was with the power company to do a full energy analysis of that facility just because that was part of my background at that time and look at that facility. So I have an understanding of what happened. And there was some, I'm going to call it deferred maintenance that has happened at our jail, which means things weren't always fixed in a timely manner, and it has caused a little bit quicker degradation than what would have been normal under good circumstances. I think we saw that in the last jail inspection. I had an opportunity to visit with those inspectors and listen to what their critique was. We have some repairs that need to be made, and they're starting to be more and more expensive. So I think a better, more involved facilities plan, even with looking way down the road at some point in time, is what happens when we have to either upgrade or replace this facility. Let's not wait until we can't possibly make inspection to then figure out what we're going to do about that. So that's one issue. The other issue is just making sure that the men and women who work there are working there safely, that they have all the tools and equipment and training to work there safely. Under this COVID-19 situation, it's very stressful in our facility, obviously, trying to do the best they can to keep everyone healthy and the officers themselves healthy. So I would like to see additional training from that perspective. Thank you.
Justin, one of the main responsibilities of the sheriff is operation of the county jail. What do you see as the major issue or major issues facing the jail, and how do you plan to improve on them?
Well, no doubt the facility itself is going to have to be addressed at some time or another. It is an aging facility. The more important the now questions and concerns that I have, the jail is extremely understaffed, and that's one of our only areas that's mandated staffing because of determines how many inmates we can house. We really need to work on the staffing with that, as well as the training. Those people need the opportunity to expand their training. There's some in and out issues of, making the jail work a little more fluidly as far as with our agency or other agencies, inmates in and out. It's kind of a traffic jam. There's some issues I'd like to look at there to try to make it a little more fluid, but mainly just training and manpower.
Another jail-related question that was submitted by a community member. If elected, what steps would you take in diverting offenders who are experiencing mental health issues or substance abuse to treatment programs rather than throwing them in jail?
Wonderful question, and one of my major initiatives would be to pay more attention to the mental health. We're kind of fortunate because the last two legislative sessions, again, that Sheriff's Alliance, spearheaded by Sheriff O'Connor and in partnership with Gulf Bend Mental Health, spent quite a bit of time going to the legislature explaining to them the issues that more rural communities have with mental health. Our jails are not good mental health hospitals. The individual doesn't get the treatment and the help that they need. It's not good for the officers that are working with them who may not have the best training for mental health capabilities, and it ultimately doesn't help our community at all. So they came back the last legislative session with the legislature funding 5 mental health officers, specially trained deputies on the street to work this whole region. Already we've seen mental health transfers down where we're not having to send officers out of town, less mental health patients locked up, and more of them actually getting the help that they need to be able to be on the street, living a more productive life. I want to see more of that. What I would love to see is us to band together and be able to get a local in-house, in-care facility in Victoria County that would serve this multi-county region. Because again, when we have to transport someone, when we haven't been able to intervene and help them, and they go out of town to Austin or San Antonio or whatever, their families can't support them in those locations, and it just exacerbates their circumstances. Mental health is going to continue to be a big focus of law enforcement and certainly of mine as sheriff.
Justin, if elected, what steps would you take in diverting offenders who are experiencing mental health issues or substance abuse issues to treatment programs rather than throwing them in jail?
The mental health program that has been established, we have 4 to 5 deputies. I think for the most part, they have helped divert a lot of that, what you're talking about, keeping people out of jail that don't necessarily need to be there. The issues, the real world issues we run on, the problems we run into it is that system, the way it's structured, because they cover other counties as well, is it's really kind of an 8 to 5, Monday through Friday type assistance. What I would propose would to get some of your field guys that are there that work the shift hours, get them certified and trained as well, okay? That way when it's after hours, we're still able to give the citizen that benefit, and as officers, we're going to be educated on how to do it. I think we just need to expand that training, not keep it just specifically in that unit, but branch it out to the patrol units in general.
Is it considered a rebuttal to agree? I mean, that's good stuff.
Sure, and then I'll allow you to address
Thank you.
something as well.
Sure. That's what I was telling.
Pardon me?
That was my rebuttal.
Okay.
I wanted to let him know I agree. That's good.
That was your rebuttal, okay.
That's right.
Good. So I'm assuming you agree, so we're good.
I'm all right with
Rebutted and rebutted, we're good. We're on track again. In recent years, there have been some high-profile cases in the area that remain unsolved. This is another, community question. Disappearances of people. Actually, this question came from a few, so I combined it. Disappearances of people. A young girl was found hanging in a tree a few years ago on property, and other cases like that. How do cases that go unsolved impact the trust in the sheriff's department with the community, and how should you keep the public informed on the progress of those types of cases?
Well, obviously, each case is going to stand on its own. Some of those cases we inherit because people travel through our county and leave those individuals sometimes. Sometimes it's very difficult to identify them because of the condition they are left in. If we think that our interdiction and the work we do on the highways to help stave off some of the drug cartels and the activities that they have is not appropriate, it absolutely is, because those are the kinds of things that happen and they get left in our community. Now, sometimes it could be community members that are just very difficult to solve, and we have investigators that continue to work on those cases and even work on as cold cases. However, if they're not making progress, there's not much information to share. That being said, because of the business background I have a term that's very near to me, and that's customer service. Law enforcement certainly does their job with a big heart, and they want to serve the community well. However, the concept sometimes of customer service and that communication that you're talking about doesn't always come through as good as it could. And one of my focuses would be to help our officers understand how important a little bit of communication with the family might be, even when nothing's happening. So, thank you.
Justin, in recent years, there have been some high-profile cases in the area that remain unsolved, disappearances of people. A young girl was found hanging in a tree, and others. How do cases that go unsolved impact the trust in the community or in the department of the community, and how should you keep the public informed on progress in those types of cases?
As far as in impacting the trust, what we need to do a better job of is communicate with the community. We need to be a little more transparent. Now, with those specific crimes and cases you're talking about, sometimes there's not a lot of information we can give out other than advising the community if they're safe, or maybe if there's something specific they need to keep an eye out for, and have some lines of communication where they can reach us. A lot of the details of those cases would be private, and you would deal with the family directly. It's not for, the frontline newspapers.
Thank you. Dale, what changes, if any, do you plan to implement as sheriff that would benefit the citizens of Victoria County? And what would be your time frame to implementing those changes?
Changes that would benefit the citizens of Victoria County. Justin's spoken of this. I call it something a little different. I think he calls it career progression plan. I call it a career, not necessarily progression, but a career pathway plan, if you will. What I want to do is help officers in our agency understand what's going to be expected of them in terms of increased education, increased training, taking on greater responsibilities in order for them to progress to different levels within the agency. Those still aren't guarantees. I don't believe that the time is the most important thing, but it's the how they've produced and also invested in themselves. Now, I'm talking about the employees because anything that we do to develop a more professional, better employee that will stay with us longer and actually develop into leadership positions, that benefits the citizens of Victoria County.
Justin, what changes, if any, do you plan to implement as sheriff that would benefit the citizens of Victoria County, and what is your time frame for implementing those changes?
Well, I think the platform I've been running on, which is the career progression plan, step pay plan, and aggressively trying to recruit and retain some of these people, that's going to benefit the employees. There's going to be more boots on the ground. Your citizens are going to get better response time. They're going to get better service. One of the things, once we staff the house, so to speak, one of the things I would look into is years ago, we had a resident deputy down there in Bloomington. There's been a lot of concern in that area, and they would like to see that come back. I've talked to the fire department about it, and I think the arrangements can be made relatively simple, but that's an added thing I would like to bring down the road. But first, we need to fill the vacancies we have and give these men and women a clear career path so that they stay with us and avoids us from becoming a training ground. We don't need to keep spending tons of money, tax dollar money, on training somebody for 2 years and then we lose them to another county because there's no path for them here.
This was another question from a community member. Can you explain your vision for the sheriff's office when it comes to community relations?
Well, the good news is I think the sheriff's office already has a good relationship with their community, but I would like to see the officers in the community a little bit more. Part of that's going to fall on my shoulders. The leadership is going to have to spend more time even visiting with community groups, probably even having some community focus groups, if you will. That's sort of a buzz term in industry, but we can use it in law enforcement to try to get some real input from our citizens. You know, sometimes even though their perceptions may not be our reality, it's their reality. And so we need to take those things into account. So it's going to go back to those 3 C's. We're going to have to spend some more time listening and figuring out how we can connect, and then ultimately ask them to help us with the safety and security initiative in our community. It is their community. You know, we can only police as actively and as securely as our citizens allow us. And so we have to kind of judge that a little bit.
Justin, again, the same question. Explain your vision for the sheriff's office when it comes to community relations.
Well, it's all about communication. We need to make not only, you know, your field level guys stay fairly connected to the community in whole. They're out there on the streets every day. As an administration, we need to have ears and listen to our field guys. We also need to open up and be available for community comments and discussions. You could have, you know, little town halls here and there, just to hear. That way you stay connected with what's going on. I think hopefully we can continue our school resource program. I think that's a great way for the youth to be connected and involved with law enforcement. I'm proud to be a part of that right now. You know, and we just need to continue in those areas like that. But communication is really what it boils down to.
These next questions are specific to each of you based on your websites for your candidacy. So, Dale, you claim today's criminal element is smarter and better equipped than ever before. Explain what that means to Victoria County.
Well, what I'm saying is because of the access to technology, especially technology, the criminal element knows even better before how to get to us, and they prey on our most vulnerable citizens, our kids and our elderly. We do have some cybercrime folks in our office. I think we need to continue to pay attention to that. It's not all through cybercrimes, but But again, because of the sophistication of how these criminals work, sometimes they may not be in your community, but they're still victimizing your community. And so we have to be able to pay attention to those things, work with other agencies, federal agencies, the Marshal Service, to be able to bring those people to justice when they are preying, if you will, on citizens in Victoria County. We know we probably all have friends or neighbors who have sent a check or a pay card to someone because they thought a relative was being held hostage, as one example, or how young people may be victimized and scheduled for dates that wouldn't be appropriate and could be dangerous for them. We have to pay attention to those kinds of things. That's just one example of the sophistication. I will tell you the drug cartels that are running up and down our highways have become more sophisticated than ever, and they know how to market their products in our region and avoid police. So that's what I'm talking about.
And it's a two-part question. Given all that, what are your plans then to make the county safer from today's criminal element?
And that's where we have to pay a lot of attention to the agencies that we partner with. The Sheriff's Alliance Coalition is a big part of that, sharing information amongst all of these regional counties and working together. That's part of it. Even though I've been criticized for this, spending time in Austin and Washington, making sure that those legislators know what's happening in Victoria, Texas, and giving us the resources where possible to help deal with that. Some of the federal agencies are better staffed to deal with some of these crimes. So what is the level of the relationship we have? It's very strong today. We need to continue to build on that. And then there was something else I wanted to say about that, but well, there you go. Thank you.
Justin, on your website, you state your mission is to keep the people safe, informed via a model of conservative government in the office through transparency. So explain what that means to Victoria County.
Well, I think it's, one, keeping the people safe is following through with the platform I've been running on, which is getting more people out on the street and keeping these people. We can be a lot more proactive instead of reactive. When our numbers are low, by nature, the enforcement side of it turns into a reactive unit. We want to become proactive on that. On the fiscal conservative and the transparency, I think that's just being open with the people. If they have questions, we need to answer them. We don't need to hide behind doors and refuse to communicate with people. I think that's part of just being out there. And I think that transparency will be there.
The second part, how do you accomplish that? Yes, sir.
You have a leader that's connected to the community as well as to the office itself. I think that's the simplest way. You know, if I'm out there in amongst the community and know their needs and willing to talk with them and visit with them, everything is going to be transparent as far as in what we're trying to do to assist them.
And this will be the final question, and you'll each have a minute for remarks. The chief deputy position will be coming available at the end of the year. Dale, how will you choose your next chief deputy?
Well, the chief deputy is a very important part of the agency, and it's going to be an evaluation process. We will look at obviously the commanders that are in place and whatever else may be available to consider. We may have the perfect talent right there in the agency. We may not. And I have some thoughts and ideas, haven't made up my mind on anything like that. I haven't really worried about that right now. Obviously, whoever is elected will be able to come in and have Chief Boyd there for at least 4, 5, 6 months, and that'll give time to do that evaluation and that search.
Justin, the chief deputy position will become available or open at the end of the year. How do you choose, or how will you choose the next chief deputy?
Well, it will be an interview process. We have the talent in-house. I can just tell you that now. Not that I'm ever going to be opposed. If the skill set is not there, then you have to look elsewhere. But we have the talent within the office. And there's a few people I'll be sitting down with and going over some interviews, and it'll be determined that way.
Thank you. That's all I had for questions. We're going to give each of you a minute for final remarks as we wrap this up. So Dale, we'll start with you. 1 minute for what you want to tell the voters.
I'll just say thank you. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for being concerned about who your next sheriff is. I want to be that sheriff that is a community-minded sheriff, one that will represent you well in this region, in the state, in the nation, and most importantly, in your neighborhoods. I think we can accomplish all of that if we work together. I do want to be that sheriff that helps protect us from bad laws that get introduced every session in Austin, but also helps promote the things that are going to be good for Victoria. I have some experience in that area, and I think we can do that. That's one area. I want to see our school resource program continue to flourish. Having those officers on campuses is important, one, for developing the trust that we talked about earlier, but also for keeping our kids safe. I'm not a doomsday kind of an individual. However, if we put our head in the sand and say it's never going to happen here, that's a dangerous position to take. And I'm proud to have those officers on that campus. And so I want us to continue to see that. And then finally, working on mental health issues. Thank you. Thanks for your support.
Justin, take 1 minute to tell the voters your final remarks.
Well, again, I want to thank the Wade Carter Show and Caleb Shaw for hosting this. When I'm elected to office, I will begin to prepare and finalize the budget, like we talked about, my 100-day plan. This will be done with the input from the commanders. We're going to start with the career progression plan and working on the manpower issues and the retention. We're going to start immediately working on the platform I've been running on this whole time. I do want to look at the aspect of possibly hiring a full-time law enforcement specific grant writer in-house. I think that will bring a lot of our tax dollars home to Victoria. Like I said, other than that, throughout this campaign, I've been blessed to meet and visit with scores of citizens. And I truly feel blessed, and I look forward to serving you as your next sheriff. Thank you, and remember to get out and vote.
Dale, Justin, thank you and appreciate your willingness to get involved and not only in tonight's debate or forum, but also to run for sheriff. I know it's difficult on you, it's difficult on your families. It can upend your world, so to speak. So I appreciate your willingness, both of you, to step out there and run for such an important position. It speaks volumes to both of you and your commitment to this community. So thank you for that. I want to thank Caleb Shaw for providing me the opportunity to moderate this. It's a unique experience, and I'm honored that I was asked to do that. For all of you that tuned in and watched, thank you very much for doing so. I hope you learned the differences between the candidates and how much it's very apparent how much they love this community and want to improve it. Early voting begins on Monday. Make sure you get out and early vote. If you can't get out and early vote, please do so on Election Day on July 14th. When you are voting, please mind everybody's social distance. Wear a mask if you must. We do want you to be safe and healthy as well. So again, thank you for taking part in tonight's candidate forum, and appreciate everybody that tuned in. And don't forget to get out there and vote. Early voting begins Monday, and Election Day is July 14th. Thanks everybody for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ash.
Thank you.